All right. Okay, let's see. All right, people are joining. So I have successfully figured out this part. So it's all downhill from here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is the Legal Tech Week Journalist Roundtable, where we all chat about legal tech every week. Bob is usually the host, but Bob is unable to be here because he's speaking at a conference. And so we're going to do it ourselves, and we will see how disastrous this decision turns out to be. I am Joe Patrice from Above the Law, and I am joined by a selection of panelists. Let us begin in the order that they're on my screen with Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal, focusing on business of law, and technology. And I thought Bob was on tour with the Rolling Stones. That's why we were having this renegade episode this week.
I mean, he might be. He just doesn't want us to find him.
All right. And well, since you've already piped up, Stephanie.
Am I? Okay, frozen. Stephanie Wilkins, Editor-in-Chief. What am I? I'm so tired. So Editor-in-Chief of Legal Tech News at ALM. And see, this is what happens when Bob lets the kids run the show. We can't make any promises.
Great. And joining us, but still muted, is Isha. There we go.
My AC is so loud, so I didn't want to. Hi, yeah, I'm Isha. I'm the reporter.
Isha, no last name. She's like Madonna.
Isha Marathe. I'm a reporter, like Madonna. I'm a reporter with Legal Tech News, and I work with Stephanie, who's my EIC. It's nice to be here again. Thank you for having me, Bob, wherever you are.
Great. Well, so without Bob here, I don't know where we want to begin. Actually, no, I do know, because this was a big issue when we first covered this story way back when. So DoNotPay. We talked a lot about that. There were some ups and downs. What's going on there with them?
Yeah, so this was a piece that came out this week about how so DoNotPay has agreed to settle a lawsuit that alleged that they were engaged in the unauthorized practice of law, and this is they have several lawsuits that are pending, but this was one in the Northern District of California, and I liked the suit. The suit claimed that DoNotPay was neither. It said robot lawyer DoNotPay was neither a robot nor a lawyer. Which that reminded me of the famous phrase about the Holy Roman Empire being neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But no, yeah, we've talked a lot about DoNotPay and Josh Browder and everything that happened with them on the show. It's been something that we've been following for a while, and it's obviously the terms were not made public, as is the case with a lot of these suits, unfortunately. But yeah, it's interesting that because obviously they're facing a lot of, they have several lawsuits out there that are still pending. I think maybe some of them have, I think maybe one other one settled, but I'm not positive about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's something that's we've talked a lot about, and about the implications for not just chatbots and ALSPs, but also how generative AI has supercharged a lot of this stuff. Maybe Josh Browder flew a little bit too close to the sun when he tried to use. He was one of the earliest adopters of ChatGPT, but tried to use it in a way, or threatened to use it in a way where he would be like getting the answers and like fed to him, or through a client in court, and the whole thing turned out to be a huge mess, and probably brought on some of this additional scrutiny and litigation and whatnot. But it'll be interesting to kind of see, like, whether this kind of starts the dominoes falling for the other lawsuits, whether they also settle, or whether some of them do end up going to court. But yeah, typically these suits do end up settling, and for DoNotPay, I guess that was the case for them too.
Yeah, Stephanie.
Oh no, I was going to say, when you said neither a robot nor a lawyer, I was going to reference the coffee talk on SNL when it was
right.
Nor a lawyer discuss. Yeah. So.
Well, so this was an interesting story. Like, it's everything involving DoNotPay has been interesting. Obviously, they had the situation where they were claiming that they were going to argue Supreme Court cases and stuff, which was adorable. They tried to engage in a situation where they would be in somebody's ear. All of those were problematic and got them extra scrutiny. We've talked in the past about how they got some fairly thorough investigative journalism about whether or not they could really pull off all the things they could pull off. My take on this, though, and I think Victor already flagged this with the, this is coming more with more generative AI and so on and so forth. We also had recently another unauthorized practice of law claim against LegalZoom, not, the people, a generation of product that I thought we were past. I thought we'd moved on to these kind of generative AI things, and we moved past the idea that LegalZoom can do what it does. But the weaponization of these unauthorized practice of law arguments against anybody who's trying to move the model in different directions, not necessarily to say that these organizations don't deserve to be called out for some of this stuff, but to what extent is the unauthorized practice of law litigation problem that's cropping up something that we need to get ahead of, regulatory wise, with states starting to cut this off at the, at the pass and say, you know what, we are not going to let this linger in courts forever.
Well, yeah, then I agree with you on the LegalZoom thing. I thought we were past that too. They had settled multiple lawsuits in the past. Like, I really thought we were past that one, but apparently people are just going to keep bringing this up. And at least, I don't agree with any of them, but can we at least focus on like the robot lawyers now? I don't know. People are just never going to give it up, it seems.
Yeah, I understand the point of, UPL laws in general. But for me, I always felt like it was more for like the con man who doesn't actually have a law degree, but pretends that they have one, and then they fool a bunch of people into giving them money or giving them whatever, and then they go to court, and then they, pull some shenanigans like on Damages or one of those TV shows. That's what I always associated with that. I never really associated until I started, doing this. Obviously, I never really associated, do-it-yourself services like LegalZoom. And yeah, like you guys have said, I kind of thought we were kind of past the point of LegalZoom. Obviously, there's always going to be some people that hate it, right? That think it's the worst thing since unsliced bread. But I think it's I kind of thought that it was kind of established enough that people weren't really going to bother with it anymore. But maybe generative AI just changed everything. Because look, one of my relatives just said to me the other day, she's like, "Oh, we're looking into estate planning and whatnot. So we just asked ChatGPT about how to set up a will trust." I was like, "No, don't do that."
Well, no, and that's exactly, if these, especially for things like LegalZoom, like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do it on the company thing, but like, I would way rather have someone go to LegalZoom for their will than ChatGPT. Like, what?
Right.
Yeah. We want to eliminate those so people actually go get bad advice?
Right. Well, because LegalZoom, part of how they managed to deal with these in the past is, these are forms that, they clearly identify when what level of legal help you're getting with each one. And they're all forms that are vetted by actual lawyers. That's different than generative AI situations where it is kind of guessing, maybe informed guessing and educated guessing if we're being charitable, but guessing. And that's a very different situation. But it made me think, is this going to be an issue, especially with the acceleration of it, where we need to stop waiting on the courts to make law and start getting ahead regulatory wise and saying like, all right, this is what we think is in fact unauthorized practice of law. It is the con man. We're rewriting the statutes so they can't be stretched to XYZ. Because if we start dealing with all of this in the courts, we are going to get bogged down for a while, I would think.
But, we're seeing some states that are loosening. Like Utah and Arizona are the ones that have explicitly done it. And but still, I think California was just even going to look at it, and then that started this whole like Armageddon. Every time it comes up at the ABA, it ends up becoming a huge deal, and with a lot of impassioned debate, argument on both sides and whatnot. So it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, obviously, you know, there's always this attitude of like, well, if Utah and Arizona can get positive results, then maybe other states and other bars will start, you know, following along. But I feel like there's going to be enough protectionism and enough entrenched opposition to these tools that you know, we're going to be dealing with this for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and I think to answer Mike's question in the chat, or at least part of it about the pro se litigants, is like the one exception to acting as a lawyer, if you're not a lawyer, is if you're choosing to do it on your own behalf solely and waive a lawyer. If you're only acting for yourself, you can take fate into its own hands. You can't be purporting to act on behalf of somebody else. Am I right about that?
That is true. But I think that actually raises the most interesting wrinkle, and this, you know, both LegalZoom and DoNotPay potentially are in this world. What if you're representing yourself, but you're using forms that you got at the lowest level of LegalZoom, or you're using advice you got and parsed through on your own from DoNotPay? Now, at that point, are they giving you legal advice that you're pro se, so you're okay, but like, that's going to be where that line is fuzzy, and litigation is probably not the best way of dealing with it.
Yeah, and we saw, like, what was it, the Fifth Circuit or whatever circuit Louisiana is in, where they make you disclose whether you use generative AI tools for, you know, when you were drafting your response, even if you're pro se. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like Joe was saying, that obviously, you know, yeah, for the person who can't represent themselves and is taking their risk, they're not going to be necessarily, you know, punished by this. But yeah, I mean, like, would ChatGPT then go on the hook for something if they provide bad advice or hallucination or whatnot? I mean, yeah, I think these are all issues that are going to have to be resolved.
I forgot they were the ones that did that, because just this week, didn't the Fifth Circuit come out and reject standing orders on Gen AI? So
yes. So
I don't
as
know
I
if it was the Fifth
recall,
Circuit or if it was the third. I can never remember.
But I mean, that just reminded me that story happened this week.
as I recall, it was Brantley Starr, judge in the Northern District of Texas, I think, who had this rule about everybody had to disclose their GPT.
He was the first one to do it, but there was one very specific judge. I remember Steve Embry wrote about it. That was very much specifically mentioned pro se litigants as like a special fuck you.
Yeah. Starr is, of course, the nephew of Ken Starr. So, you know, Nepo babies, federal judiciary edition. But the Fifth Circuit, as I gather, it got to the circuit level and they were like, we're not going to get involved in making our own rules. So like, these judges can make them if they want, but we're not. We're going to reject that idea. Well, I guess we've talked about this for a little bit, and we've got a good point here. Unauthorized practice of law and Gen AI-ish stuff. That makes me think of Harvey. And
we're going to go there already?
Well, I mean, it's the right jump from unauthorized practice of law and all that sort of stuff.
Well,
I feel like you should start with.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it was you, Isha, but if Stephanie's got thoughts on it too. What?
I mean, I don't know.
Harvey, right? Everyone knows Harvey. There's been a million questions about Harvey floating around out there, and people use it, but no one really wanted. No, I don't know if they didn't want to, but no one could really. I'm just sort of setting up, and then Isha can talk about her actual articles because she's the one that did all the work. I'm getting too much credit for them, but like, yeah, they kept, forever we talked about how they just had their entire website was just a wait list, and then they finally have a real website now. But like, everyone was like, they're getting all this money and hiring all these attorneys. What do they actually do? Nobody even knew. And like I said it on my LinkedIn post, like the number one question I've gotten for the past year is like, what do you know about Harvey? And I'm like, honestly, nothing. We haven't seen it. We've reached out to them. They have never even responded. Not even like no comment. They've just not responded. We know Bob has talked to them. Like, he's like the only one of us, I think, that has actually ever talked to them. Lots of rumblings about, are they real? I've seen their stuff, but maybe it's not great. Nothing more than that on anything. I mean, on background, like, or on the record, no one said anything more than that, and like, finally there was just enough of these articles. And then the bombshell information article on last Friday evening from the information where Harvey just went out in the news and was like, we're seeking another $600,000 in investments. So we can reach a $2 billion valuation. And by the way, we want to buy VLAX. And everyone was like, what now? What's going on? Like, have you talked to VLAX? Have you talked to anybody? Like, what do you do? Who are you? And it just sort of like, people just like, LinkedIn started blowing up, my phone started blowing up. Everyone's like, what the hell is happening? And so we were like, okay, we've been like hearing these rumblings and trying to talk to people about Harvey. It's time to dig in. And then Jill, you'll get this reference from our relativity panel. Intrepid beat reporter Isha Marathe went on the scene. But yeah, so you can go ahead, Isha.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we'd been looking into Harvey for a while. Back when Cassandra was on our team as well, like we'd all been kind of curious about it and people were asking about it and we just hadn't gotten an interview. And I think the article says the first email we sent was December 2022 to ask for an interview, and we knew we hadn't gotten one. And we were just not sure exactly what to do, but we'd heard all this stuff, like obviously on background, and then off the record. And we were just like, we got to do something at some point, like we got to write something. And I think it was honestly like this article was conversations over 2 or 3 months, I want to say, starting March, interviews. And and it's just really supposed to be a background of how people are using Harvey, because it is really mysterious and sort of it's just got like a mystery around it, and I think that's something that's attracted a lot of people, and I think that's cool, but also can be a red flag for some people. So
yeah, really, and I mean they themselves have been very clear that their whole like stealth approach to marketing and all of this was intentional. I mean, they're to a degree that, mystery breeds interest and etc. And I think for a while that can work, but perhaps it's gone too far now, especially in legal tech, when people expect demos, especially, I mean, people eventually expect you to like, if you're claiming like at the price points they're supposedly charging, people want to see what you're doing is not just, the term ChatGPT or OpenAI wrapper, ChatGPT wrapper has been floated so much, like people want to see that it's not that. And I mean, maybe they don't care if I don't have $120,000 to give them, but eventually it's almost like enough is enough. And people started saying investors were not happy about it. Like, show us what it is we've invested in. So we start pulling all this together. And at the same time, they do have some big law firm who's using it. And so Isha was pulling this all together, and it was like, honestly, the article was so long that we split it into 2 pieces. But we cross-referenced them both because we didn't want anything to feel like a hit piece, because that's not the intention. I mean, honestly, we'd still love to talk to Harvey now. And so I'll put both links in there. But like, so it is like, here's what law firms are going on the record and saying about how they use it. Take it for what it's worth. Like, no, it seems to be amongst a line, like a stack of AI tools they're using. This is how they're using it. None of it's really mind-blowing, but this is what they've said. Nobody has, at least on the record, come out and been like, this is horrible. But the article speaks for itself. We'll put it in but then there's the other one being like, here is why it is raising eyebrows. And we feel like, I mean, we tried to be like, it's neutral. We put in there everything people said to us on the record. It is what it is, not an intentional. I mean, so far, nobody's given any blowback about it being like...
We haven't heard from Harvey saying anything's factually inaccurate. So I think that honestly, like, I think it would have been okay. Like, they would have had some more time to do what they're doing if they hadn't done that information thing that they did. Because I feel like by saying they were seeking $600 million and that they wanted to buy VLEX, it just kind of... I just think like it raised so many red flags for some people that at that point we were like, okay, well, we have to write something, because that just is really strange and alarming, for them to go about it that way, I guess. So yeah. But
I mean, we just ramble forever. We've been like, if it's not about Harvey, I don't think we know how to speak this week. So feel free for someone else to jump in on this, because yeah.
No, I really enjoyed the piece. That was really well done, both of you. the VLEX thing is intriguing, right? Because these rumors, well, not rumors, these things don't just pop up, right? You wouldn't just say it. I'm not, if I'm interested in buying a company, I'm not going to just come out and say it unless there's some kind of, unless either it's a smoke screen or there's some kind of like actual, some kind of actual like fuel to the fire, right? I mean, so is VLEX for sale then? I mean, are they?
So Mike Bomberito posted the article on LinkedIn, like within a minute of me having seen it, which was both within like 5 minutes of it being blasted out by the information. And I commented, like, I saw this and almost fell out of my chair. And he's like, yeah, it's been going around the grapevine for a while now. And I was like, well, journalists aren't usually on the grapevine, unfortunately. But I personally have zero doubt that it is completely true that they do want to buy VLEX. I think that is 100% true.
Yes.
Whether or not there is actually truth to the rumor that there is a discussion, I have zero idea of the truth or false of that.
Because I remember because I think for case text, weren't there rumors for like months, the reports? There was like a report months before it happened that Thomson Reuters was interested in, and we all were kind of like, oh, what's up with that? And then it happens. So
it was that weird leaked article that Joe, you found it, that sounded like it was written by AI because he was using words like frothy and like all of that stuff. Remember?
Yeah, as I recall, the way it happened is that we got information that TR was gathering resources to make a giant acquisition, and we talked about it on this show, and all of us were like, so it's gonna be case text, right? Like I think we all like very quickly were like, I don't know who else they would do, and we also had reason to believe that we heard things about what magic bullets they needed to get their AI finished, and it seemed like that was what case text was doing, and so it made some sense. But that was how I recall that. So I want to jump on real quick the point that was made about Harvey being a rapper. Now there's that can sound negative, like it's just aesthetic, but in a sense, aren't most things just rappers? I mean, all these people using OpenAI as the base for what they're doing, at some level, everything's a rapper of sorts. So to what extent is Harvey on that continuum from a cool screen theme to something that's really a filter through which GPT works?
I will say, I think with Harvey, I think the way that they made the claim, as I understand it, was that they could build you a custom LLM for whatever you wanted on your data. And that is so incredible, because at the beginning, all we heard from law firms was, well, we're afraid of our data, we're afraid of client data going into OpenAI and, or whatever you're using. And I think that's why now it seems like a rapper, if all they're doing is not making custom LLM models, which is really difficult and really expensive, as I understand it. As opposed to, it's a chat bot, it's document summaries, and it looks very much like ChatGPT from what we hear. And that's also the big draw, because it is really nice. It's really easy to use. It looks really good. It's fast. But I think that's how I understand why like the rapper thing is really like a word that's going around. What do you think, Stephanie, and Victor?
Yeah, and I mean, I think to your point, Joe, to some degree, most things might be a ChatGPT wrapper for sure, but most of them do not cost $120,000 a seat for a ChatGPT wrapper. And I think that is where the problem is coming in. Like,
dropped it.
I mean, like, they're getting these insane fundraisings and all of this, like, it's just all this hype. And if it's like, if there's no goods to back up that excessively higher positioning than all of these other tools, if just like for argument's sake, in a vacuum, everything is some version of a ChatGPT wrapper, why is theirs worth so much more hype and so much more money and so much more everything? It's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, I was agreeing to that, and now move on. Go for it.
And there was something else you said, Isha, and I don't, also what they do. Another part of the issue people are saying is that, like, in the last year and a half, like, what they do or what they purport to do, we don't really know because we haven't seen it, has changed so many times. Like first they did one thing, then they did another thing, and now they're doing something else, and maybe they do all three. And do they do any of it? Do they do all of it? Who knows?
They have, and they've changed their pricing a lot as well, as we understand. I mean, I know the 120 number that we heard from one firm was late. First, we heard it late 2023. And then when we spoke with the same person again in March, they said it was now 60 to 70, which was less than co-counsel. So, and for their needs, well, they were like, if they can do legal research and, you know, make us whatever we want, which I don't know that it's exactly doing. I believe for Reed Smith, they are doing Edgar research, right? Yeah, which is according to the article that we wrote. So
yeah, it's like
Actually,
every time you turn
I
around,
had
it's
a question. I had a question about the whole rapper thing. So like, I mean, and maybe you can answer this, Isha. I mean, so how much of it is just built on top of ChatGPT, and how much of it is custom? Is that a black box?
I have never seen it. Maybe I know Bob has spoken to them. I don't know if he's seen it. Maybe that's like a good question to ask him, honestly.
Okay.
But
last time, so the last time, sorry to interrupt you. The last time I asked Bob, he had not seen it. I don't know if he saw it in the very beginning, but even the last time he did his current interview, I asked him if he saw it when he did that, if they showed it when he did that interview, and he said no. So
yeah, so I think maybe I know it looks very similar to it. I know that from at least late last month, when I had my last interview about what it looks like. It looks similar to ChatGPT in many ways, or that sort of like user friendliness. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I don't know technology wise. I mean, generative AI in general, OpenAI is not exactly the most transparent about how their technology works. So there's no way for me. Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Well, that raises an interesting aspect to this too, that I don't know. You know, I'm not on the inside of these sorts of things, but OpenAI is not the most transparent. They're making changes, and it's not just when they come to a new version. There's, you know, little fiddling going on all the time. And at a certain point, if you're a company that's dependent on building some level of wrapper around that, and the underlying technology is getting futzed with all the time, that's going to present a problem for you building the right kind of wrapper, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is literally where we just basically call Mike Bomarito into this conversation, because that's been his soapbox for a year before anyone started listening to that. Because if everybody builds, it's not even a specific, I won't even say it as a specifically OpenAI thing. Like if everybody is building on the same underlying technology, and say it fails, say one of these New York Times or whoever copyright infringement cases succeeds and they have to do algorithmic engorgement. I'm saying maybe that could be a long shot, but just go with me in theoretically here, right? Say one of these fails and they have to retrain everything, and everyone who is built on top of the same exact model suddenly doesn't have it. That's a problem, which is part of their reasoning behind an altruistic belief of I shouldn't train on copyrighted material, and they built theirs from the ground up. Part of it also is like, do you want to take that risk if something goes wrong? And yeah.
And that's in the article, right? That at least one law firm was annoyed because, you know, it kept kind of breaking down, and they were like, wait, you know, there was a new GPT model released, and every time, and it, like you said, Joe, it's not just a new GPT model. In between that, there are like so many changes, as I understand it. And, you know, and every time that happens for Harvey users, according to what this one firm said, you know, there's issues, and, you know, people have been frustrated is what we hear. But again, I don't know. I mean, it could be incredible, and it could just be so amazing that they need to keep it secret, you know, and maybe a few months from now we'll be like, oh wow, we were totally wrong. So.
And honestly, like Nick Rishwain was one of the people that she spoke to that actually went on the record in it. And, you know, and like he was like a big skeptic and a big critic, but he even said, you know, like, I would love to be wrong about this and would happily, you know, go to like eat my words and be like, congratulations.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah. But I mean, it's just like, I don't know how much in an industry where so much is based around demos and so much is based around eventually transparency, and there's so many big players in this market. Like maybe they could take that OpenAI money and go to a different industry that doesn't care. But in legal, like, how are you, how long can you continue to sell this mystery without people being like, the
Yeah,
jig is
but
up?
What was,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know.
I was just gonna say, what this is me being old. What was the car company? Was it Saturn who like had commercials that never showed cars or even talked about they were a car company, and they would just be like a field that would say Saturn, and everyone's like, what the hell is going on here? I will note there aren't Saturns anymore.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I saw a Saturn on the street the other day. I was like, oh, I haven't seen one of those in a long time.
I
but
didn't
no,
know
like,
there weren't Saturns anymore. Like,
but
tell you I don't drive without telling you I don't drive. Yeah,
well, you live in New York. That's
exactly.
but no, but the whole thing about law firms is yeah, like on the one hand, I get what you're saying, Stephanie, about how like, you know, how can these law firms just go into this, but I assume they're probably getting detailed demos and they're probably doing their due diligence, however much for whatever it's worth. And you know, look, we know like these big law firms, they're very much follow the leader, right? So if a few like top firms, if they sign up like a good number of like, you know, MLaw 50 firms, and the rest of them are going to be chomping at the bit to get in on this.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it's also another point in the article is that, you know, a handful of investors have started coming out and being like, we're not so happy with what we're hearing. So, I mean, I guess I don't know. This is where I am completely out of my depth in terms of, you know, VC money and investing and whatever. And like, I know some of it is just like, I have a ton of money. I'm going to blind trust throw my billions into things. But like, at what point do you have to be like, okay, I need to start seeing a viable product and some kind of return on investment? Like there's only like, you can fake it till you make it, but at what point, we were talking about this earlier today, at what point is how long can, I mean, because I'm sure plenty of startups out there are faking it for a while. I get that. But like, at what point is enough? And this I do not know, because this is so not my world.
Yeah, it is interesting. Well, we did unauthorized practice of law, and then maybe practice of law, maybe something else nobody knows. Something that is not necessarily law in that it exists in its own space of dispute resolution is arbitration. And Stephanie, you have some thoughts on arbitration this week.
Oh, it was just a story. When I practiced, I did a lot of arbitration. So you're just trying to give me
Well, there you go.
some PTSD. Yeah, the American Arbitration Association, I think pretty much since Bridget McCormick took over as the CEO, for people who don't know, she was a state court judge in Michigan. She's pretty awesome. She recently, I think late last year, I don't know, took over as CEO of American Arbitration Association. They've been doing tons of tech-focused stuff, and they just built out a whole ClauseBuilder library with a bunch of, yeah, like over 500, I think it was. I used to think that was like Monday. I wrote this Monday, and it feels like a week ago, like 3 weeks ago. The AI helping people get uniform arbitration and mediation clauses and contracts to speed up alternative dispute resolution and help that whole area. And it seems to be a big hit. So yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of boring. This is why I thought we should talk about Harvey last, because everything else feels like womp womp.
I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, well, this is what, the second week out of like 3 where we talked about them now.
Yeah.
American Arbitration now. So I mean, they're making moves. Interesting.
They really are. Yeah. No, and I think they're smart moves too. They're not. They're definitely don't seem to be doing a vaporware approach. So.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, and you know, I wrote about them independently recently too. The lean into these sorts of tools makes a lot of sense for the arbitration model, right? More so even than regular legal. Like we all are talking about regular legal, but regular legal has a bunch of trusty, but also, you know, tried and true, depending on your perspective on them, procedural rules to make sure things work right. Arbitration exists in a place to help streamline dispute resolution, and it has an eye toward how can we make this, you know, faster, cheaper, better. So the idea that they become the, proving ground for these new technologies makes a lot of sense. In a lot of ways, I think legal should have pushed back a little bit on it and allowed the arbitration world some extra time to play with all this stuff, because it introduces fewer problems over there. In a lot of ways, not everything has to be in person. Not everything has to be in courts. You don't have to deal with all of these different state or even national rules, because it can be international. Some arbitrations exist. So I think it's important the way in which the organization and other arbitration organizations too, but obviously we're talking about AAA, that they lean into these technologies, because they're the ones who have the flexibility to do the sometimes messy work of playing with something that might not be perfected yet. So I'm glad that they're doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's
yeah.
And I mean, they've always, I feel like even back, to date ourselves when we were, in the earlier days of ECF and things like that, that was just a complete nightmare. And even you could just be like, oh, I could just email you my brief. That's so awesome. Like, I mean, those sort of like, it lends itself to a lot easier, like easy innovation as opposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never was involved in arbitration on the arbitration side, but my firm, partners I worked with were arbitrators sometimes. And so I was involved in a lot of arbitrations as the arbitrator. And it was useful to be taking legal the same legal research and the same law applies, whatever, but you had so much more freedom to kind of do stuff to get to the answer faster that might not have been the procedures and steps you would have to take in a court. That sort of freedom, I think, is very valuable here. And so I like that. If anything, I would say I would like to see more of it happening in this world than trying to kind of force feed the Gen AI into anything else. Oh, well, okay. With that said, I guess I had a couple of things. One that I thought was a little quick, and then one that was more of a thought experiment. I'll go with the thought experiment. That way, in case we don't get to the other one, it doesn't matter. So I had some conversations this week about in a non-legal world that got into in a non-tech world that got into tech. I was talking with some recruiters about just the market as a whole. This coupled with the announcements of some firms that they were going to start cutting back on first-year hiring. I also spoke with TR's new president this week who said that he'd even had conversations with firms about how because of technology, they're looking at scaling back on their first-year hiring. And it got me wondering, recruiters were asking me, is this tech revolution and this AI going to result in fewer lawyers and, be a problem for us? And that kicked me on a thought experiment. I haven't written this up yet, but I intend to. I'm not sure obviously it moves around where lawyers are, but from a big law perspective, if you cut back the base of that pyramid scheme that is big law, I don't know as though that's a long-term good move for a firm. I worry that it's hard to figure out when you hire somebody out of law school, it is hard to figure out which one of them is going to be able to stick it out. Your golden child could just as easily burn out in 3 years and go, you know what, I'm living on a farm. That happens. So you can't minimize your odds at the base, and unless you just decide you're going to do that and lean super hard into the lateral market. And for the recruiters I was talking to, they were very happy about that option. But that still supposes somebody is training these people to get to the mid-level. And I don't know who that is if firms lean into the idea that they can cut costs at the bottom.
I also have a lot of, All right. Also, in terms of, you say you're golden child, but also if all these firms, which they are still hiring purely based off pedigree and who they can nab from, the top schools, they think they know who their golden children are, and they're often wrong. And if they're just going to go with that strategy and they only hire fewer people based on that, they could be sorely mistaken. Sorry, go ahead, Victor.
Sorry. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard the thing about first years, because I have spoken to people like Josh Danek is pretty convinced that like people that are going to hit it are going to be like the staff attorneys, or like the e-discovery lawyers, or the contract lawyers, the people who are just doing that, the old traditional e-discovery. Those are the ones who are probably the most in danger of just being of going on the chopping block. But kind of like what you said, like with the first year, it's like, well, you kind of need to have that pool of, like, for lack of a better term, your channel, like, because then like you don't, I mean, because then it's like, well, who are going to be the ones that progress past, into the senior associate level, or into the counsel, or into the partner level, and whatnot. And I mean, yeah, I guess you could find, you could just always just bring in laterals, but then that undermines the whole, like, our culture is awesome, and we're different from all the other firms because of our wonderful culture, and blah blah blah. And if you're just getting people from random firms because you're not hiring people to develop them anymore. But so it's interesting. I mean, I definitely think that, like, I mean, it does kind of raise a question. It's sort of like, yeah, where are you going to get your bodies from at the end of the day? Like, I mean, maybe it's more of a case where, like, they'll still have to hire first years, but have them bill less, which I'm sure they'd be thrilled of. They'd be thrilled with, although maybe they might not like their bonus at the end of the year. So yeah, there are all kinds of implications as to how this could shake out.
Does it change?
Burning out your junior associates is literally Big Law's model. Like, hire a bunch of them, work them into the ground, see who sticks, and then from those, see who has some combination of the skill and or just the endurance.
But as mentioned in the live comments, the entire business profit model rests on leverage. If you aren't billing out huge amounts of time at the bottom, I guess partners are going to raise their rates a lot, but that's going to be met with some sticker shock. Weirdly, because I do think clients are in a weird place where they would rather spend a combined pool of $30,000 an hour on a bunch of first years than spend $2,000 an hour on partners' time. I don't know why they do that, but there's something sticker shocky about it. But yeah, that if you don't have them doing that, because obviously the staff attorneys and all that are definitely going to go, but they in some ways were on borrowed time, because put aside generative AI, old school AI was largely getting them out of the way, right? Like, we were starting to have you don't need bodies to look at all those documents. Generative AI gets to the point of, I don't need you to write the first draft of the cease and desist letter. I don't need you to write the first draft of the memo. And if that's the situation, then you don't need a first year. You could just hand it to a third or fourth year, and then they fix it up. And then that's where you start cutting.
Okay, but I don't know how many. I mean, I hope everyone on here knows who Jay is, because she's brilliant, probably the most brilliant consultant in this industry. And her view on this has always been, I was going to quote her, where she's always like, people always ask her, like, well, what about first year associates? We need first year associates. Her response is always like, where do you think second year associates come from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, you can rely on laterals, but eventually you're going to run out, and eventually they're going to be senior. And like, what, you're just going to you can't not have junior associates. Eventually, like, you need junior associates. That's where mid-levels and then seniors come from.
Or,
differently. You need to train them differently.
Right.
You need to accept the fact that Gen AI exists and the profession looks different than back in your day. And you just do. That's just the reality.
And you don't have to hire as many, right? You don't have to, maybe instead of hiring, I don't even know, like 50, you hire like 30 or something, or maybe, instead of retaining all your summer associates, maybe you just retain, like, 2/3 of them, or whatnot. I mean, yeah, I mean, but yeah, like ultimately you still need the people, like you said earlier, you still need the people at the base in order to get to the top, right?
Imagine, how about this? Like, thinking absolutely crazy, because that is the level of technological change we're talking about. imagine a firm like in the real big like headcount level, like a Baker or a Denton, something like that. Imagine them sitting down and going, you know what? We're absolutely going to have a lowball JV firm. We're going to have a lowball firm that does lowball work in smaller markets. And we're going to hire first years and stuff to do that because they can't pay for AI, the cost for these like lowball things. And they do the training and the high stakes work. We sit around and we promote a third year from one of the JV firms to our big league at some point. That's the sort of like insane thing that could make sense. Or maybe it's the AmLaw 200 ends up being the ones who hire all the first years, and the 100 just sits back and picks them off like a college football draft or something, you know? Like, weird stuff could happen here. And that's what that was what this whole conversation I had with these recruiters about, like, what's it going to do to our industry? And I was like, I think your industry is going to be fine. I actually think it might actually get crazier off of all this, but the rest of law could get real messy.
Yeah. And to Robert's point, there's like, you hire fewer ones trying to based on how many you think you need fourth or fifth year. I mean, you still have to like try to figure out and play your odds of how many will stick it out and how much attrition there will be. And it's a gamble, right? I mean, I guess you try to moneyball it. I don't know. Like,
well, and you know, as somebody who's been in that model, you can see the firm makes decisions. The firm makes decisions at like second and third year where they're like, you know, this person's not working out. I'm gonna, you know, gently edge them out the door, tell them to look at other things, whatever. And I'm gonna keep my golden child who's billing me all this and is doing everything great, and they're definitely excited about being partner. And then that person has a life event, their middle of their third year, and they're just like, I am absolutely leaving and I'm hurting alpaca. And you're like, well, all right, well, now what do you do? So you can't really bet on it. Like sometimes some of these firms I've worked with, I look at who's a partner now and I'm like, if to borrow from Christmas Vacation, if I woke up tomorrow with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than the fact that that's the person who made it to partner from my class, you know? Like that's a thing, you know?
Or from law school. Yeah.
Or from law school. Yeah. So it's a gamble. And I think there's a reason it's a pyramid scheme. And part of it is the leveraging and part of it's the unpredictability. And you give up on that. I don't know, man. It's wild.
Well, it's always the case, right? Because I mean, law school, they take more people than they take more people than they have a need for, right? And what's the first thing they tell you is like, look to your left, look to your right. One of these people isn't going to be here at the end, you know. So it's kind of with a firm, right? It's like look to your left, look to your right. Okay, one of you is still gonna be here and be partner. One of you is gonna go probably be a GC at like some company somewhere. And one of you is gonna go, you know, to Hollywood and write scripts. And then one of you is gonna probably just leave the industry completely because you're sick of it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just that actually sticks it out.
Right. And but that's the thing, like law schools bring in all those people because there's no negative proposition for them. They're going to get money from them no matter what. Firms, though, yeah, there's leveraging, but you're also paying them a lot. And if they don't rise up the chain, then you end up left with nobody at the fifth year level. So you've got to, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. And maybe law school is the answer too. Maybe they change their whole model to be the people who actually train the people in practical stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
As we come to the very, very end, I guess I will throw in my last little bit, which is probably less legal techie, but still fun to the extent it involves OpenAI. Elon Musk sued OpenAI because he has a hardcore set of lawyers. Those are his words. He has a hardcore litigation team who fights everything, and he was suing OpenAI. And it came time for the lawyers to go into court and give their motion to dismiss arguments, and so he dropped the case. Because he dropped the case. Well, so why did he do this? I hypothesize in my piece that it's largely because he had incredibly bad arguments, and somewhere along the line, a lawyer said, "I'm refusing to say that in court." But his claim, though, was interesting to me on another level, to the extent we talk about, and OpenAI has to be is necessarily part of our conversation. You know, they're the basis for a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Things like Harvey, for instance, which we talked about for the meat section of the show.
Never heard of
You never heard of them. Well, unfortunately, that's kind of how other people think. Anyway, the point is, OpenAI, the question of its structure is what was at the heart of this lawsuit. And while Elon Musk was not exactly the right champion for this suit, there is something to be said for you have a Delaware not-for-profit charitable institution that has tons of money coming in from deals with Microsoft. We learned this week that they now are going to be integrated in the next run of iPhones. What do we do with a non-profit, for-profit organization? And the implications of that for people like Harvey and whatever.
First of all, redefine nonprofit.
Yeah, I mean, technically FIFA is nonprofit, right? And like the NCAA is nonprofit, NFL.
And I will say, at least OpenAI's structure makes more sense than the NCAA ever did. Their structure is technically the for-profit entities are subsidiaries of the nonprofit, and they are technically just there to raise money to advance the nonprofits in work. Now, this obviously raises all sorts of questions about fiduciary duties of the board. Are they actually?
You have a whole dedicated alignment department that you take very seriously and do not fire or let them quit. Yeah, you don't like out of nowhere fire your CEO and then over the weekend hire them back and fire all your board. You don't do that sort of stuff when you are a serious company, right? Okay, so we're being a little sarcastic, but it did strike me as interesting that Elon was obviously the wrong vehicle for this. He was like a Tesla for this. He caught fire and ran into a wall, or maybe SpaceX blew up on it. Whatever. He was not great for this, and also because his argument was mostly, I gave money early on, and so I'm offended that you now have a for-profit entity, as though when in reality, all he was really offended by is that they weren't giving all of their deals to him. And now he's trying to build a competitor, which good luck on that. Anyway, there is something to be said, though, for what happens to these kinds of organizations that are advancing this stuff, especially stuff that there's an argument that we're mortgaging the next decade worth of technology toward, and we don't really know how we feel about its corporate structure. I mean, what's your PDOOM level at? We don't even know how long we'll be around anyway, so it doesn't matter.
My PDOOM's about 0. I really am not scared of this sort of stuff. I mean, it's kind of a fun plagiarism machine. I'm not really worried about everything going to hell over it. We'll see. The Cylons are not coming in my mind. Actually, all right, let's close out on that question. What's everyone's PDOOM level this week? Let's make this a regular feature. I'll pitch this. PDOOM of the week. I'll get like a graph or something and we'll show it.
More fun to discuss PDOOM when Nikki is here, actually, because
sure.
She's usually the one who's a little bit more,
yeah. Maybe.
I mean, she's not, though, because we live in a simulation, so it doesn't really matter.
That's true.
But
well, and Nikki and I are always team. We welcome our robot overlords, not because we love them, but we just know what's good for us for the future survival.
All right. So where are you, PDOOM?
I'm always middling on my PDOOM.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of that quote. Someone told me, it's like, it's not the machines are smart. It's not that the machines are smart. It's that they're actually really stupid. But they can, so I think I'm probably about probably like 30, 40.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know how we measure PDOOM, actually. Is there out of 100? Is that the deal?
Anyone who has not been on, I think it's out of 100. We've said anyone who's not been on the show before, it's like PDOOM is like the probability. So I'm going to go with 100 probability that you think, AI is going to end, generative AI is going to end civilization, like the probability of doom brought about by all of this stuff.
Okay.
Or what was the quote of Oppenheimer? It's like it's a non-zero possibility or something like that, or it's a non.
Yeah.
I always feel
Isha.
like the probability, I feel like the probability of like the world ending is always high, but not necessarily related to AI, just like in general. So I don't know. The doom low, I
Okay.
don't know what
I
that
mean,
that's always 100.
I mean, we've had a doomsday clock long before OpenAI.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
So but I don't think really, I don't know if AI is gonna like I don't give it as much credence, honestly. The more I learn about it, the more I'm like more chill, I guess. But
That's kind of how I felt about it too. All right, I'm gonna create some kind of a logo, sort of like the ones when you go to national park and it's like the risk of fire today. I'll create one of those and we can work with it.
yeah, that's
Okay,
really upbeat point to end on.
yeah, I think we should end on PDoom every week. All right, listen, thanks everybody for joining the show. You should subscribe to the extent that we are on a podcast. This does get turned into a podcast, generally speaking, I believe. So subscribe to. You should definitely join us live if you don't already. And with all that said,
please report
yeah.
back to Bob that we did not destroy his show in his absence.
Yeah, the PDoom for the show is actually quite low.
the PDoom for the show, yeah, the 99%. All right.
It's like he left the kids in charge and we did not burn down the house, so it's good.
All right.
No, we didn't talk about like anything like off the wall, you know.
We didn't even have to resort to like airing our cash cab episode because we had nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Like it was really
Classics. All right. See everybody next week. And with Bob back.
bye.
bye.
Bye.